We fight for that inch.
Rarely do I see any American Italians eating in here.
But I'm funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you?
Villkoret är att jag får leva.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
Hey there, welcome to Real Genius. I am Chris Vognar, culture critic of the Dallas Morning News.
And I'm Robert Wilonsky, who does something at the Dallas Morning News. I just don't know what it is.
He does everything, including review Carter High.
I did.
This week.
I did.
You jumped in there and reviewed a movie.
I did because you did the feature on
I did.
it. So we shared duties this week when it came to Carter High, the 1988 Carter High School Cowboys, who I remember quite well, even though that was 2 years after I left DISD, had graduated from Thomas Jefferson High School, although I still have my letter jacket, so I could in fact have doubled as a cast extra in Carter High. But I remembered I was at UT at the time when they won their championship. My brother was actually at Hillcrest then, so it was this was a big player in my late teens, early 20s, this story.
So we should talk a little bit about why a movie is being made about this team. The 1988 Carter High Cowboys were just a dominant high school football team. They had
best in Dallas.
Best in Dallas. Best in the state, probably, right?
Well, they did win the state 5A title
They did win
in
the
1988.
state
yes.
5A title.
Beat Odessa Permian in what became the Friday Night Lights tale. Although Friday Night Lights fudges the truth
Made
a little
it the
bit.
final, but it's a
Right.
movie, so what do you want? They had a lot of eligibility issues because of an algebra grade.
Right.
A single algebra grade.
A lot of UIL hearings that took
Yes.
place. You did not know if they were going to be able to play or if they were going to be benched during
And then you
those
had other
playoff
teams
games.
jockeying for position to be able to get that spot if they had to abdicate it. And then shortly after the season, a few of their players went on an unfortunate armed robbery string.
When is there ever a fortunate armed robbery
Well,
spree?
I can come up with... No, you're right.
I'd like, no, please. I open the floor to you.
It reminds me of, never mind. Let's keep talking. Now there's a movie out. It's actually made by a filmmaker who was on that team.
Their wide receiver.
Arthur Muhammad. He will be the first to tell you he didn't play much because he was playing behind one of many, many all-stars on that team.
So let's take a look at it and let's
do
talk
that.
a little bit about it because we have a lot of thoughts having seen it at least 1.5 times.
Let's do it.
If
So
you
here's
didn't
Carter
have
High.
football, what would you be doing?
In Texas.
What makes you all so good as a team?
I'd say our discipline.
High school football is king.
What makes us so good? Me.
But in 1988,
Carter has in fact been forced to forfeit their final 3 games due to an ineligible player.
You say it passed. His report card shows it passed. But the UIL say it failed.
one team had to fight
These young boys should not be punished for some grown man mistakes.
just to step on the field.
So Arthur Muhammad is an insider. He was there. He was very close to it, and that means that he knows what happened. He witnessed it. But he was very, very close, and there's the question, was he perhaps too close? Yeah. And
Do you think that he was? You've done the feature on it. I mean, we'll talk about the review in a second. But you've talked to him. You've spent a lot of time with him. You were on the set when they were filming. You've talked to him after the fact as he was beginning to try to get theaters interested in showing this. This is very much a DIY operation.
It is.
Co-produced by Greg Ellis, former Dallas Cowboy. They've been showing it around at NAACP events, church events, and so forth.
And it will be opening in theaters in Dallas and Houston on Friday.
Right, it opens here Friday, then it makes its state rounds, and then tries to go nationally after that. So I'm curious in terms of what Arthur says about was he too close to it to tell a story that you and I may have told or some outsider might have told if they had just come to it knowing what they knew from the headlines and maybe from interviewing.
Well, he would say that the story has been mistold many times by the media.
The old media
Yes, the media.
misrepresentation.
I mean, that's not a direct quote from him, and he would say that he's the perfect person to tell it because he was right there. I know that a lot of the former players, including Derek Evans, who I also spoke with, who did about 7 years in prison.
He's the hot tub signee.
He's the guy who
with Tennessee
signed
while in
his
the hot tub.
letter of intent in the hot tub. Had a really nice conversation with him. It sounds like he's got his life back together pretty well. Look, it's tough because, like you said, it's a DIY film. It's pretty low budget. I think he did a pretty solid job with it, considering all of the restraints. And I don't know, it's hard for me not to root for guys who get a second chance and do something really good with it. So I almost have to separate the part of me that says, good for you guys, you made mistakes. And Derek Evans was very upfront when he talked to me. It's like, I did this, I messed up, I'm not making any excuses. The words he used were, I own this. But he got out and he's creating a life for himself. So there's that which I applaud.
The cautionary tale part of it.
Yeah, and the real life part of it, and the fact that it's a story that really does deserve to be told. It's also a movie with fairly, with limited resources. It was on a budget and on a real tight schedule. Given those constraints, I thought they did a pretty good job with it.
Yeah, it's funny. You and I, after we saw it together, and then we watched it again separately on DVD. We saw it on a screen once at an NAACP.
Arthur wants his DVD back, by the way.
I'll make sure I get it back from James Ragland.
Oh, good. Okay.
What I thought was interesting about the film is that it's very linear. It goes from, they're in the middle of the playoff run at that point where it starts, and then goes all the way through the sentencing in front of Judge Joe Kendall,
which is just a heartbreaking scene.
Right, but it's very linear. I thought it could have used a little bit more. Well, I think for me the biggest problem with it is that you don't know much about these kids. I mean, they're almost interchangeable. If you don't know Derek Evans, who that is in the hot tub, I'm not sure that you know the player's name in the hot tub. There's a lot of sort of taking for granted that you know the story and know who these guys are, which I think is sort of the problem when a film is being made by a guy who is so close to it that he doesn't necessarily feel the need to explain to you who these guys are.
That's a good point.
It's very elliptical in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to see, a development segment, basically. This is who Derek Evans is, not by saying, this is Derek Evans.
Well, you see no backstory, you see no
precisely.
You see very little.
You see some.
Home life.
There is some home life, but
very
not
little.
much.
But very, very little. And you see it more toward the end when they decide to start doing the holdups.
Right.
Because they're trying to give you some sense of why they did it. Because
they were broke.
They were broke.
And they wanted some money.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't all broke per se, but they wanted some money.
Right. That's why they were willing to put at risk so many collegiate careers and possible pro futures, because they wanted some money. At the time, they were very short-sighted. And the film doesn't necessarily need to spell that out for me, but it does need to give a bit of a better sense of who these guys are, how they got to where they are, and sort of some idea of why they're not one interchangeable group of football players. And that's, in a lot of ways, the problem. I think where Friday Night Lights succeeds, if it succeeds at all, is that you get to know the players individually pretty well. I mean, a lot of great sports movies do that. Hoosiers, a lot of those guys. Even Remember the Titans. And for me, another problem, and again, it's a small problem, because I don't want to say I judge it on a curve, because he did do this by himself. I mean, he's been trying to make this movie for over a decade, for God's sake.
This is not a studio
No, I mean, this is there's no help here. There's no safety net. I mean, when Greg Ellis is your closest thing you have to a safety net, a guy who plays football his whole life and doesn't know anything about making movies, you're taking an enormous risk and a giant gamble. So I appreciate that all the way through. Well, in some ways the tone is also very odd. It's a football film. It's a rah-rah underdog tale in which they're being harassed by the UIL, in which David Banner as Royce West comes in to save the day and do these hearings and show, in a lot of ways, I guess, how racist at least the UIL is thought to be toward black schools and Southern Dallas schools, who were ascending the ranks for the first time in over 38 years, I believe, was the first time DISD had a school win a state title. So I think it's very rah-rah, gung-ho. There are a lot of inspirational speeches that The Rock gives.
This is Charles Dutton in full-on inspirational speech.
A lot of real inspirational speeches.
He plays the head coach, Freddie James.
So you get a lot of that, and then it goes to this heist film, and it just tonally shifts very quickly.
It's almost two stories.
It's very much two stories.
There's the story of the grading controversy and how this team was, don't know if you can say baldly that they were screwed, but there was some weird stuff going on there with the UIL, as you were saying. And then there's the story of these robberies. I'm glad it didn't whitewash the robberies.
No.
I'm glad it didn't try to act like, they're robberies. No, and then there were these robberies.
But the weird thing is, I would have liked to have seen a
attention.
film about the robbery. I mean, You know, it would have been like a Nick Cassavetes film if you make a film about the robberies. It could have been one of those kind of really gritty and grim, but darkly, I don't want to say a darkly comic film about them, but in a weird way, the film almost makes those pranks, makes the heist look like goofy pranks that go wrong. I mean, I think you said it once in the feature you wrote Sunday. It makes it look sort of like pranks.
Well, I said they started off as something like pranks, and then it turned into something.
Right, but it never looks more
worse.
serious. It never reaches, I think, the level of severity that it became in real life. I think The Last Heist is sort of a goofy thing involving a guy, the nerd character, who really, by the way, I didn't point it out in the review. I find that character to be really troublesome. He may have existed in real life, but I mean, they literally got a guy who just might as well be Urkel in the movie, who plays an integral part toward the end of the film, and the cop who stops them.
Are you dissing Urkel?
No, I'm just. You can't watch the film and not see that guy in the guy in glasses,
the great Jaleel White,
talking like this in the glasses. You know, well, come on, fellas. It's just really sort of startling.
That's more Jerry Lewis.
Really,
Urkel.
you think?
Yeah.
Well, I'm Jewish.
Yes.
So but I thought there was some. It never, I think, got to the point where you realize how sort of serious these heists had become. I think it sort of still underplayed them in some way. But again, I think people like me who remember it, who were heartbroken by the way it played out. I remember being just, as a DIST graduate, as someone so proud of the fact that a school from my district for the first time in 38 years had won the state title, whose brother was in the district at the time. I was crushed by what had happened and how they had their title revoked, how these guys threw away such promising careers and lives and futures. And I think that Arthur does a good job, if nothing else, of reminding people of what it meant, what it was, what happened, and the price that was paid for it.
And as you said, he did it
by himself.
Largely by himself.
Yeah, no, it's remarkable and it's to be commended.
So, that is Carter High, the movie.
Next week we'll be back with a movie with a slightly larger budget.
Bond.
James Bond.
Julian Bond.
That would be
James Bond.
Spectre next week.
Spectre. The Phil Spector story.
Man, I've already seen that.
That was Al Pacino.
I've already seen that.
Yeah, we're doing the James Bond
All right,
movie.
so
that's what
that's
we're trying to
next
say. So, see you next week.